we have two speakers, Maria Kekki and Jotika Khur-Yearn, who are going to speak on mapping the Shan states, old maps and manuscripts from the British Library and SOAS Library.
So hello, everybody. Thank you so much for having us today as part of this incredibly interesting panel. So I will first talk about three very interesting maps that we have in the British Library's India Office Records collection. And then Jotika will tell us about place names in manuscript colophons with examples from both the British Library and SOAS. Both of these presentations will focus on the geographic area of the Shan state, which is located in present-day northeastern Myanmar. We would very much like to welcome any thoughts, observations, or interventions on this material that is relatively little researched. So the three maps I'm discussing today belong to a small group of very large maps on textile that are distributed between three different libraries. They all come from the same 50-year period, from the 1820s to the 1860s, and from the geographic area of modern-day Upper Myanmar. All but one of these items, so one of them is on paper, and all the other ones are on hand-painted, they are hand-painted on cotton or linen, and they all come from the same donor. So three of them are in the office records at the British Library, three in the Cambridge University Library, and these are the maps that Anne already told us about, and three in the Cambridge Museum of Archaeology and Anthropology. Dr. Tin Nai Win from Mandalay University has made a wonderful survey in 2015, which I believe Anne also mentioned, which counts altogether 24 such cloth maps in the UK. So most of them are at Cambridge, but there is also one in the Royal Geographical Society, and Natasha Peridot has also let me know that there is a 25th cloth map in the Pitt Rivers Museum at Oxford. Some of these maps were studied in detail by Joseph E. Schwartzberg in his chapters on Southeast Asian maps in the history of cartography, published in 1994, which I will also be quoting here. What is important to note is that as far as we know, none such cloth maps survive in Myanmar itself today. So the Cambridge University Library maps have been digitized, as mentioned, and to a wonderful quality, and can be found in the Cambridge Digital Library. So these are the links. Yes, I was hoping to take you directly to the maps, but due to time constraints, I will only show you the general overview. So here, this is the first map. This is 2 × 2 meters of the Mainyang region. So the Chindwin River is on the bottom, and we can see other tributaries. As Allegra Jovina has interpreted, the rectangles are cities and villages that are clearly named, with Mainyang in the middle, just below the big temple. The red means that they were under its jurisdiction, whereas the blue means that they were outside of its jurisdiction. And as you can see, the map also includes descriptions of temples and natural landmarks. It's a mixture of bird's eye and landscape view. So the second map is the map of Saleh Township. So this is 3 meters times a little under 2 meters. Clearly in the middle, again, is the Irrawaddy River, and the city of Saleh is circled in red just next to the river. It follows the same logic of red rectangles of temples and natural landmarks. The third map is the only one of the Cambridge maps that depicts the Shan states, but it's very different from the other ones, as you can see. So it shows the distribution of rice, wet season, and leguminous dry season crops. This is a very large map, as mentioned. And different colors have been used to distinguish particular areas. It is really wonderful when you zoom in. All of these three maps are hand painted on cotton and are dated to circa 1860. So next we have the Cambridge Museum of Archaeology and Anthropology maps. They have also been digitized and are online. Many thanks to Rachel Hand, who has given us permission to show these maps in our presentation. I forgot to mention Rachel Rao for the previous pictures of the maps. So this one is of the Mataya region. This is 3 × 2 meters. Again, the river dominates it, and you can see mountains at the top. The second one is of the Maigley town. It's 1.5 × 2 meters. And here you can see the rivers, and the mountains are painted in a different style, but still quite prominent. The third one is the most interesting looking one. So this depicts the Minonle town in Minbu district. And this map is about 2.5 meters times 1 meter. So these three maps are all hand painted on linen. The first two made of 3 pieces and the last of a single piece. And all of these maps are dated. So these date to, the first one is from 1840, the second one from 1820, and this one is from 1839. So now let's have a look at the person who donated all these maps, both to Cambridge and the British Library. So the donor of all these 9 maps is Lewis Allen Goss. So Natasha Perdo has written this wonderful article, which I will re-advertise here, on Goss and how he might have acquired these maps. Thank you very much for Natasha for letting us quote her for this presentation and for very generously sharing her research in general. She also gave a presentation on the cloth maps in the Cambridge collections in May last year at the History of Cartography seminar. So Lewis Allen Goss lived in Burma during the latter half of the 1800s. Initially, he was a businessman functioning in Rangoon and Mandalay, and then was appointed junior inspector in schools in Rangoon in 1874, became a senior inspector in 1893, and the director of public instruction in 1894. He continued in this role until his retirement in 1901, when he was paid by the Indian government to teach Burmese language at Cambridge University. He published a couple of books, which can be found at the Cambridge University Library's collection. The 3 maps that we have at the British Library's India Office records were donated by Goss to the then India Office collections at the British Museum in 1907. The Cambridge maps were donated a couple of years later in 1910. The Cambridge Museum of Archaeology and Anthropology also holds a collection of over 600 glass plates and albumen prints that belong to Goss. They depict buildings and landscapes from across Burma, dating from the 1860s to 1880s. Among these are some of the earliest photographic images of Burma. Now, we don't know exactly how he acquired the maps. Interestingly, Goss's uncle was Dr. Clement Williams, a relatively famous character at the time and close to the Burmese royal court. It is possible, as suggested by Perdo, that it was in fact him who collected these maps and photographs and then handed them over to his nephew, Goss. So Williams arrived in Burma a little earlier in 1858 as assistant surgeon in the British Army. He impressed King Mindon with his Burmese language skills, and because of his proximity to the court, he was appointed as the first British political agent in Upper Burma in 1860. Although he was fired from this role within the year, he returned to Mandalay as the first representative of the Irrawaddy Flotilla Company. Now, we know that Williams went on an expedition on the Irrawaddy River and at least planned one for the Salween River in the 1860s. Both rivers appear prominently in the maps. The purpose of these expeditions was to investigate the possibility of navigation on the rivers and trade with China. So the Salween River, which goes directly through the Shan states, starts from Tibet, goes down through Yunnan, and then all the way down to Moulmein, which was a major trading port and the first capital of British Burma. By 1872, Williams was based in Rangoon, where he operated as a businessman with his nephew, Lewis Allen Goss, and as a middleman between the Burmese court and European commercial affairs. He continued to be in this role after King Thibaws' succession, but died of typhoid on a return journey to England in 1879. Okay, so let's take a look at the British Library maps. So this is their shelf mark, and these are their sizes. So one of these maps is on paper and 2 on textile. All 3 maps depict a somewhat similar area in the Shan states. The other thing to note is that all of the cloth maps are in fact written in Burmese and not, for example, in Shan. The 2 cloth maps were due to be digitized a couple of years ago, but were actually in such bad condition that they had to go to conservation first. The damage was mainly done by rodents that have chewed holes in the maps. We only have 1 textile conservator, Liz Rose, in the British Library, so you can imagine how incredibly busy and wanted she is. So these maps are currently in conservation and Liz is working on them. Once this is done, they will be digitized along with the paper map, and this is estimated to take place in 2021. We do have some photos taken and stitched together by one of our maps curators, Magdalena Pesco, who has very generously shared these images with us today. So these maps are so large that it's really impossible to photograph them as one. So you have to take many photos and then stitch them together digitally. So here's the first cloth map. So this map is quite large. It's about 3 times 2.75 meters. According to Liz, it is made from cotton and the map is painted directly on it, which means that the colors have been absorbed in the textile quite well. The large river in the middle is the Salween. And again, we have red rectangles for the towns, as well as temples and other natural landmarks. You also have little dotted trails showing routes from place to place with the distance explained. So with this map, we can definitely talk about a topographical map, but also an itinerary map of a sort. So let me take you around a little bit. So we can say that this map has also some artistic value with the painting of the mountains, the trees, the fish, and the deer that is quite charming. Of course, they also had a practical function in that the forest and the mountains were an encumbrance to travel. Schwartzberg has noted that the vegetation in different parts of this map is actually so different that it must have been either drawn by different artists or actually depicts different kinds of vegetation. We also have notes such as here of wood cutting areas or wood that is ready to be cut, and other places such as here where it says the wood is too young to be cut. And just to show you some cities here. So in the upper corner, you have Changdongmyo, which is Chengdong, a prominent town today. And here on the right-hand side, the big one on the right, if you can see it, is Zimemyo, which is Chiang Mai. And the one in the middle here is Changyemyo, which is Chiang Rai. And the distance between the two is described here as 70,006 units of measurement, which Jotika has translated as ports. Um,
5 minutes.
Yeah, so Schwartzberg mentions that this map has a date that corresponds to 1861. So we can see from all of the maps that they were folded rather than say rolled. So since they are quite large, it would be interesting to know how they were carried around and used. To give you some scale, here is our conservative Liz Rose with this bigger map. If you would spread it, the map would cover this whole table, which is not all in the picture. So the second map is a little smaller. So this is about 2 times 1.35 meters. It is much more damaged than the other map. So this material is, according to Liz, linen and was stitched from 3 panels. It has a white ground painted on it, on which the map itself was painted. This means the color is not absorbed in the textile and runs quite easily. So some of the colors are faded, and part of the work in the conservation is try to fasten these colors if possible. It looks like the white ground in part deterred the rodents, so it had a particular function. Liz was kind enough to show me the back of this map as well, and it has a title and a date. It is a map of Maing Sain and Maing Pun, and Jotika has converted the date to exactly the 15th of August, 1821. Now, this in itself is quite interesting as it is quite early and before any of the British invasions of Burma. Of the 25 cloth maps that have been recorded, only 5 were dated, all of them in the Goss collection. Overall, this is one of the earliest. This map also has the name of the cartographer, which is here. And again, only 4 of any of the cloth maps had the name or title of the cartographer in them. So this is also quite rare. So here we have the second map. This map depicts a somewhat similar area to the other one. The Salween River is here on the right. So here you see the rectangles in different colors, red at the top and green in the bottom. There's also other colors like yellow and blue. Mountains are depicted in blue, and one can look at this map from all perspectives. So again, I will show you this in more detail. So at the bottom, we have the green towns. Maing Pun is here, identified as the main town. We can speculate what the red X's mean here. And then if we turn the map around, we have the red towns with Maing Sain clearly as the biggest one with surrounding villages and landmarks. Schwartzberg describes this map as particularly detailed when it comes to settlement and drainage. And the purpose of this map was to identify which villages belonged under which town, So we can describe it perhaps more as a frontier map. Mapping is famously known to be one of the essential tools of colonization, but the early date of this map suggests it probably was not made for the purposes of the British. Swartzberg records that there was a letter of transmittal that came with the British Library maps, which states that all three were drawn for the Burmese government and that they were acquired by the British before their occupation of Burma. So Swartzberg suggests that this map in fact depicts two tributaries of the Burmese court that it was trying to keep control of, and one of the ways of maintaining control is, of course, mapping. Dr. Thi Nhan Nguyen has similarly argued that there was a long-standing tradition by the Burmese court of drawing maps for administrative purposes, and the fact that all these maps are in Burmese and are from the general area of Upper Myanmar and follow particular cartographic symbols does support this. Here we can see a modern day map of the area prepared by Jotika for comparison. As you can see, many of the places are directly identifiable and are next to the border with Thailand. You can also see the Salween River parallel to the border. Finally, I will briefly show you the paper map, which is also fascinating. Thank you very much to Tom Harper for arranging me to see it. It is a very large map of 3 meters times 2.725 meters and drawn only with black ink. It's dated to 1850s or 60s. Although it depicts a similar area to the other ones, it significantly expands it and is largely the map of modern-day northern Thailand. Swartzberg sees this map as a clear military map. It shows similar dotted lines as routes, as we saw in the previous one. It has names of particular military camps in ovals and the word army in some of the squares. Swartzberg suggests that these were Shan forces under Burmese command during the time when there was a campaign to try to wrest Chiang Rai and Chiang Mai from Siamese control. So on the subject of paper, I will pass on to Jotika, who will dive deeper into Shan manuscripts and place names. Thank you.
Jotika, you should be able to share your screen now, I hope.
No, still disabled.
Okay, I'll just check the settings. Try again now.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to the second part of our joint presentation. First of all, I should say that this part of our presentation is not discussing directly on maps, but it is about information resources related to place names and descriptions of local landscapes as recorded in many Shan Buddhist manuscripts. I hope that such information resources are useful for map studies or mapping all places in the regions where the manuscripts were produced, or even like supporting the map that Maria has just presented. Okay, to begin my presentation, I would like to say that the Shan people have a great tradition of making manuscripts with their native handmade papers, pens, and ink. A large part of this tradition is the commissioning of the Shan Buddhist manuscripts, which grew out of ritual practices on merit makings. These century-old traditions has resulted in collections of Shan manuscripts, which can be found everywhere, all over the Shan state, in Buddhist monasteries, as well as in people's houses. Here are some examples of manuscript collections within the Shan communities. And you can also find some great collections of Shan manuscripts outside the Shan state. For example, in the United Kingdom, Shan manuscripts can be found in many research libraries, including the British Library, the Cambridge University Library, the Bodleian Libraries of the Oxford University, and SOAS Library of the University of London. One of the significant features of the Shan Buddhist manuscript, which is the focus of this paper, is the custom of writing long and informative colophons. The colophons, which are beautifully composed in the classical rhyming text, contain some detailed information of the original donors of the manuscripts, including their residential places and the names of the landscapes, about the description of the landscapes surrounding areas. Such long colophons were usually written quite a few pages, in the beginning and again in the end of the manuscripts. Here I have chosen two Shan Buddhist manuscripts. The first one is the Buddhanussati from the British Library collections, and the second one is the Sattama Pala Medani from the SOAS Library collections. So as examples for my discussions in this paper. The manuscript of the Buddhanussati was originally written in 1866, but the copy of this manuscript in the British Library is dated 1885, only over 10 years younger than the original versions. This manuscript was first acquired by the British Museum in the 1950s, and it was transferred to the British Library in 1973. And this manuscript has a long colophon mentioning some details of the original donor, the date, and the name of the author of the manuscripts, both in the beginning and in the end of the manuscripts. So here are the 11 pages in the beginning of the manuscripts. The first page contains the name of the copy donor. Then the main text begins with the words of paying homage to the Triple Gems, which is the Buddha, his teachings, and his community of monks. Then followed by the words of praising the original donor of the manuscripts. And here are 8 more pages of the colophon text in the end of the manuscripts. Again, containing the name of the author and the dates of the text, before also carry on writing the words of sharing merits and wishing for the attainment of nirvana. And then right at the end of the manuscripts is the dating information of this copy of the manuscript from the British Library. Here are my translations of some extract from the colophon of the manuscripts. The donor of this text is Mr. Jaya and his wife. Their village is located on a hill near a lowland rice field. Also, there are big bamboo groves around the village. It is a nice place with a good size of human populations and cattle. To the east of the village, there is a large area of rice field and green grass field at the foot of the village. There are 2 rivers running through the rice field and flowing eastwards. To the north, there are large area of the rice fields, and the river of Sarai flow down against the water wheel and flow eastwards. To the south, there are lines of hills and slopes stretching as far as the Silver Mountain, Khur-Yearn or Nguay Tong. The nearby areas are rice fields and big bamboo groves, a village well known for having good bamboo trees, which are as tall as 15 fathoms, about 25 meters. To the west, there are hills filled with bamboo groves and farms, and there is a road leading to the Choku Pagoda with nice views and landscapes. This place, called Kungko village, is the place where men and women are living happily. That's the end of my translations. So when looking at the colophon of these manuscripts, we can see that Kungko village and its surrounding areas of all four directions were elegantly described. And there are two notable landmarks. The number one is Khur-Yearn or Nguay Tong, which is in the south of the village. And the second one is Choku Pagoda, which is in the west of the village. However, there's a little problem of identifying the location of the Kungko village, as when I put these questions, on the social media, I was told that there are a few villages with the name Kungko, and the problem is that a clear landmark like a town nearby the village is not mentioned in the colophon of this manuscript. And when looking at the maps of the regions today, on the Google map, there are two places with the name Khur-Yearn. One of them is near Mương Yai of the Shan state, and another place is near Loiko of the Khaya state. And it's not very clear about the location of the Choku Pagoda, which is also mentioned in the colophon of these manuscripts. And therefore, further research is needed to confirm the location of the place where the manuscript was produced. Let me now move on to the manuscript
just a couple of minutes.
The Sattama Paramedani, a copy of which is in the SOAS library collections. The original version of this manuscript was written in 1876. But the copy of this manuscript in the SOAS library is undated, although this copy was probably produced about the same time of the original versions. A significance of the colophon of this manuscript is that there are three place names that can be easily spotted on the maps. Here, the 9 pages are in the beginning of the manuscript, which contain the information of the copy donor, homage to the triple gems, and the original donor, with detailed descriptions of his residential village and surroundings areas. And here my short translations of the extracts from the colophon of this manuscript. The donor of this text is Mr. Pinya and his wife. Their home village is located in the east of the capital city of Salom, of the country of the great king Solapur. The village is called Yuatit in Burmese and Wanma in Thai, a place with great prosperity, with the number of houses and people increasing, and being a place on a trading road to the Potong Molamang or Momain, where the foreign goods arrive. That's the end of my translations. So when looking at the colophon of this manuscript, we can see three outstanding places, names. So the first one is Saolong, which is the capital of the Kantravati. And the second one is the Yuadi, which is the village of the donor of this manuscript. And the third place is Molamang or Momain, Potong city in the Mon state of Lower Burma or Myanmar. Interestingly, Prince Solapur, who was the ruler of the Kantravati, was recorded in this manuscript as a great king. When reading the British colonial history, we learned that after Upper Burma and the Shan state became a part of the British colonial rule from 1885, there were some heavy fighting still going on in the Solapur state of Kantravati before it was finally captured by the British in early 1889. But Solapur himself went to hide in the jungles and never surrendered to the British. Today, Solapur is recognized as a hero of in the regions. Here are the final 5 pages of the manuscript, which again the colophon of the the text contain the dating information and the manuscript, and also the names of the author. I haven't done any translation of this part yet, and so before concluding my presentation, it is worth noting that both manuscripts that are discussed here were written before Upper Burma and the Shan state become part of the British colonial rule from 1885. So such documents become rare materials for Asian studies prior to the Western colonial rules over the region. To conclude my presentation, I would like to say that for centuries, Shan manuscripts have been produced and preserved through various traditions of practices such as astrology, charms, healing, protections, and a belief in Buddhism. A belief that the donation of manuscripts containing Buddhist text is one of the best meritorious deeds. A significance of the Shan Buddhist manuscript is that many of them contain long colophons with place names and descriptions of local landscapes. I can say for certain that in the old days, every Shan village and every town produced and commissioned many Buddhist manuscripts, and therefore we can possibly find local descriptions of most Shan villages and towns recorded in the Shan Buddhist manuscript. So on these occasions, I would like to raise awareness of the numerous corrections of Shan manuscripts and the richness of information resources for various field studies, including map studies and mapping all places in the regions where the Shan manuscripts were produced. Finally, I would like to say that Shan manuscripts are hidden treasures that are relatively understudied. And therefore, there are opportunities for research, digitizations, preservation, conservation, and translations of the manuscript for access and discovery of cultural heritages in the areas of Asian studies. And this is my list of the references, and that's very much from me.
Thank you very much, Maria, and thank you very much, Jotika, for your presentations. We've got some time for some questions. Hamish, could you tell us, have we got any questions, please?
Yes, we have. I think probably this is to both our speakers, but Diana is asking, can you tell me if material analysis of the colors has been undertaken?
So for the cloth maps, I think Liz did mention that she wanted to do it. I'm not sure. If there's someone from the conservation listening, maybe they would know better.
Okay. And a question from Yana. Is the distance between places in Shan maps given in Yojana, if I've said that correctly, in Thai and Lao manuscripts, distances are usually given in Yojana. So I was wondering if it's similar in Shan maps.
So it's not. So if I can share my screen. So this is the distance. And Jotika may help me out here. So it says from to a place, and then it has the amount and that the end is the measurement, which is tying qua. So Jotika, how would you translate it precisely? But it's
Yeah,
not.
basically, literally is you can translate as port. You know, tying is a port. Yeah. So I don't know about the type of measurements exactly they use. Of course, in the old days, they often use like Jana says, usana, usana. Also, in the Burmese term, they have a usana for measuring. So usana and time probably, similar. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Another question from Khur-Yearn, I think that is, may I ask, are there ancient Burma maps illustrating its vassal states in the upper Mekong Basin, apart from the Francis Hamilton maps? Did you understand the question? You're
Yes,
just
I'm just thinking because there are so many maps that I am not familiar with. The third map that I showed, the paper map, shows quite a large area, which includes the Mekong. You would have to refer probably to Dr. Tin Nine Wing's survey of the maps. He's made a survey of all of the maps, including paper maps and all different kinds of maps.
Okay, thank you. And I hope the last one will be slightly easier. Claudia is asking, what materials were used for the book covers? Is the black lacquer?
Yeah, lacquer. Yeah, lacquer. Black and lacquer, and also the sometimes is red lacquer. Probably color, color with red, kind of red. There are some lacquer with a red color, and also they also use other materials for decorations, like pieces of stones. And they also use the paper itself, to make it thick. Mulberry papers.
Thank you. That's the end of the questions, Chris.
Thank you, Hamish. Maria, thank you very much for your presentation, and Jotika, thank you also for your presentation. In fact, this is now the end of the conference, and I want to thank all our speakers for their excellent and fascinating presentations and making this afternoon such a success. The variety and diversity of what we've seen today is just a taste really of what we have in our collections, and I hope it will encourage us to explore them even more for our research. Before you all go, can I just say that in the next couple of days, you'll be receiving a feedback form, and these are all the attendees, and we'll be very grateful if you've got a moment to fill it out. This is to help us learn from what we've done, and also to plan next year's conference. And whether we're on at a physical venue or whether we are online, I hope we will see you again next year at our 2021 annual conference. Thank you all very much for attending. I've enjoyed it. I hope you all have. Thank you very much.